Hello, my name is Vinitra, and my parents didn't even notice when I moved 3 states away. Not a call, not a question, nothing. They posted a family photo that week with the caption, "All of us together," and I wasn't in it. But that was just the surface. They sold off the land my grandmother left me, forged signatures, took out loans in my name, then called me, asking for help, like I owed them something. They thought I was still the quiet one, the good daughter, the shadow. But what happens when the shadow learns how to own the light? Would you stay silent? Or would you build something they couldn't ignore? Let me tell you what I did. I stood in front of the house with my hand halfway to the doorbell, wondering if the wood beneath the porch had always creaked that way, or if time had finally caught up to it. The paint was still chipped on the right side of the windowsill, the mailbox still tilted slightly to the left, but it didn't feel like mine anymore, or maybe it never had. I caught my reflection in the car window behind me. The woman staring back wore confidence like a coat, zipped to the neck, clean, composed. But under that, my fingers trembled just enough to betray me. I steadied my breath and rang the bell. The door opened slower than I remembered. Then came a face I once memorized without effort, my mother's. Her eyes scanned me like I was a saleswoman she didn't want to buy from. A beat passed. Then two. "Sorry," she said, brushing a loose strand of gray behind her ear. "Who are you here to see?" It took me a second to answer, because I wasn't sure what was worse, the fact that she didn't recognize me, or the fact that she sounded completely genuine. "It's me," I said. "Venitra." Her mouth parted just slightly. A moment of calculation flickered behind her eyes. Then the awkward, rehearsed kind of smile that people give to avoid admitting they're caught. Oh, right. "Of course," she murmured, but she didn't move to hug me, didn't even open the door all the way. I stepped in on my own. Inside, the house smelled of lemon polish and time. The hallway hadn't changed, but everything else had. The living room was rearranged. The couch was new. On the wall where my graduation photo used to hang was a framed print of my brother Darnell standing beside a city councilman, shaking hands like he had just solved world hunger. Above the mantel was a recent family photo. Everyone was there. Darnell, our sister, their spouses, a couple of cousins, even the dog. Not me. I walked into what used to be my bedroom. The walls were a pale beige now. My posters were gone. My bookshelf, the one my uncle built me when I was 10, replaced by a printer and filing cabinet. The room had been turned into a home office, efficient, quiet, and utterly indifferent. Later that evening, I checked into a modest motel on the edge of town. Lorraine had said there was no room left. "The house is full," she claimed, like it was a hotel she didn't manage. After a lukewarm shower and dinner from a vending machine, I lay on the bed and opened my phone. Scrolling felt like a habit I couldn't quit. That's when I saw it. A Facebook post from my sister. "Happy birthday, Mom. So lucky to have all of us here. Family complete." I stared at it for a long moment, waiting to feel something sharp, anger, hurt, anything. But all I felt was the weight of confirmation. I laughed, not loudly. The kind of laugh that barely escapes your nose. The kind of laugh you use when something is too cruel to cry over, but too familiar to fight. 18 months ago, I left this place, packed my bags, moved 3 states away, and never once got a call asking where I'd gone. I had convinced myself it was my silence that kept them distant. But the truth? They never noticed I was gone. I didn't sleep that night. The motel room clock blinked through the hours, but my eyes stayed open, trained on the ceiling. My mind wasn't spinning. It had settled. Still, something in me itched for answers I already knew. Just past sunrise, I got out of bed, pulled on a sweater, and sat on the floor with the duffel bag I hadn't unpacked. From the side pocket, I pulled out a small plastic sleeve. Inside were a few folded receipts and a greeting card with a sun-bleached cover, roses and gold script. To the woman who gave me life. I stared at the florist confirmation slip. 2 years ago. sent to this same address. The card had been written in my hand. To Mom. Thank you for everything you did when I didn't know how to say it. Love, V. The flowers were expensive. Back then, I'd just gotten my first major deal in Houston. I wanted to mark the moment with gratitude, even if no one asked for it, even if no one would say thanks back. Except they did. Just not to me. I remembered the post, clear as day. Thanks for the beautiful bouquet, sweetheart. You always know how to make me feel special. Love you, baby girl. Posted by my mother, tagged to my sister, captioned, From your favorite daughter. That day, I told myself it didn't matter, that she must have mixed them up. Maybe it was the delivery, maybe the florist got confused. But even then, part of me knew better. Now, sitting on a stained motel carpet, card still sealed in its original envelope, I knew exactly what had happened. She knew where those flowers came from. She just decided who they should have come from. Later that morning, after some dry motel toast and 2 cups of bitter coffee, I drove back to the house. I didn't call ahead. I didn't need permission. Nobody noticed when I was gone. Why would they care if I showed up? The driveway was empty. Good. Darnell's truck wasn't there. I pulled up quietly, parked behind the shed, and walked around to the garage. The side door was still sticky on the hinge, same as always. I jimmied it open, careful not to make too much noise. The garage hadn't changed. Dust thick enough to write your name in, the smell of old paint and rust. I wasn't there to look around. I had a purpose. In the far back corner was a stack of storage boxes. I recognized the handwriting on the labels. One read, Venetra, school stuff. I crouched and pulled it down, brushing away a dead spider from the corner. Inside were binders, notebooks, my high school yearbook. And beneath those, neatly placed in a manila envelope, was the letter. I knew it before I even opened the flap. The envelope was sealed, but warped. The edges were crumpled, the bottom corner chewed at, like it had been dragged around. Bits of dog hair clung to the paper. There were smudges, spots. It had clearly been shoved somewhere dirty, and it hadn't been opened. My handwriting was still on the front. For Mom, please read. I didn't open it either. I didn't need to. She never read it, never wanted to. She'd taken something I wrote in one of the hardest moments of my life, when I had just left college after a breakdown, when I was struggling to forgive her for the way she'd looked at me like I was disposable, and used it as lining for the dog bed. Probably thought it was trash. I stood up slowly, holding the letter in my hand. Then I placed it back inside the box, on top this time. Message received. I walked out without touching anything else. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead of heading back to the motel, I drove into town. There was a small cafe near the courthouse, the kind with sun-faded menus and chipped mugs. I ordered black coffee and a breakfast sandwich, then pulled out my laptop. I checked my calendar, my inbox, and opened a folder labeled Mid-South Acquisitions. Inside was the pending purchase file for several rural homes nearing foreclosure. One address caught my eye. My old house, the one I just walked out of. The final stage of acquisition was in 5 days. I stared at the file for a moment. There were no bells ringing in my head, no alarms, just a strange stillness. I didn't mark it for removal, didn't make any notes. I flagged it as internal interest, sensitive ownership confirmation pending, and closed the laptop. Then I picked up my coffee, took a sip, and leaned back in my chair. Let them keep thinking I came back because I missed them. Let them believe they still had control over what I knew, what I owned, what I wanted. Because truth was, they never saw me coming either. By the time Sunday rolled around, I had already made peace with what I wasn't going to hear. I didn't expect apologies. I didn't want explanations. I just needed to see it with my own eyes, to prove to myself that what I'd been avoiding all these years wasn't a misunderstanding. It was policy. I pulled into the driveway 5 minutes late on purpose. The family brunch was in full swing. Through the windows, I saw Darnell holding court at the head of the table like he was running for mayor. Laughter drifted out when I opened the front door. No one turned. The dining room smelled like bacon and cinnamon rolls. I stepped in slowly, scanning for an empty seat. There wasn't one. Every chair was taken, siblings, cousins, even someone's neighbor who wasn't even blood. I cleared my throat. Lorraine looked up, offered a polite nod like I was a last-minute guest at someone else's event. She didn't say, "Sit down." She didn't say, "We missed you." Darnell didn't even glance my way. A bar stool was tucked near the kitchen island. I carried it over, made space at the corner of the table, and sat with the same grace I'd learned in rooms where I wasn't invited. Plates were passed. Conversations flowed around me, never to me. I reached for eggs. The platter moved just as I did. I poured juice. No one asked if I wanted coffee. The silence wasn't loud, it was practiced. After a few minutes, Lorraine stood with a glass of orange juice, tapping it lightly with a spoon. All heads turned toward her. "I just want to take a moment," she began, "to honor the one who's been holding this family together." Her eyes landed on Darnell. "To the child who stayed, who took care of the family business when others wandered. Darnell, we're proud of you." There was clapping. Some stood and raised their glasses. I offered a smile. Not because I meant it, but because I'd learned how to wear one like armor. Then Uncle Morris turned to me. He tilted his head the way people do when they're trying to recall your name, but can't quite reach it. "You used to write little poems, didn't you?" he asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Back in school. That was your thing, right?" He chuckled before I could answer. "That's something, ain't it?" Someone laughed behind a napkin. Darnell looked right at me and grinned, the kind that doesn't hide its teeth. I excused myself after the meal. No one asked why. In the hallway, I passed the same photo that haunted me a few days ago. Darnell beside a politician. Handshakes, medals, captions. As I walked to the guest room, where I was told I could rest for a bit, I noticed the cabinet door near the hall was slightly ajar. Something inside caught my eye. Curiosity didn't feel like revenge. It felt like survival. I stepped in, found a stack of legal folders, Lorraine's neat handwriting on each tab, tax records, medical bills, property deeds. One folder read, Granny Pearl, land title. I opened it carefully. Inside was the notarized deed from our grandmother's estate. The property had been split equally between her grandchildren, on paper once. Now it had a revised version, one name, Darnell's. I scanned the pages again to be sure. My name wasn't listed, not even as a witness. No letter, no call, no explanation. The signature from Granny Pearl looked digitized, stamped, dull. Darnell's signature was fresh, ink still crisp. I didn't take a picture. Didn't pocket anything. I just closed the folder, slid it back into the cabinet, and pulled the door shut. No slamming, no scenes. On my way out, I passed Lorraine in the hallway. She gave me a look that wasn't guilt, wasn't shame. It was emptiness. I nodded. She didn't ask me to stay longer. Back in my car, the air was warmer than I expected. I rolled the windows down halfway and sat still for a while. Years ago, my father stood at a family reunion and told a room full of people, "She's the delicate one. Emotional. Not cut out for big things. A burden, but she's ours." That was when I was 14. I thought I'd outgrown it. But now, older, wiser, more silent than ever, I realized they hadn't changed their minds. They'd just learned how to say it without saying it. Through chairs not pulled out, through signatures misplaced, through stories where I didn't exist. Some people inherit homes. Some inherit debt. Me? I inherited silence. The next few days passed in a blur of errands, small talk, and short drives that seemed longer than they used to. I moved through Clarksdale like a stranger playing a part she never auditioned for. I didn't wear grief on my sleeve, but I could feel it in my teeth. On Tuesday afternoon, I stopped by the farmer's market to pick up some peaches. I was scanning a box for the ripest ones when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Well, look who's back in town." I turned and saw Mrs. Carla, the neighbor who used to slip candy into my pockets when I was a kid. She looked older, of course, but still had that warmth in her voice that made you forget how cold the world could be. I gave her a polite smile. Just for a little while? She leaned in and gave my shoulder a squeeze. I'm so glad your mama came through that gallbladder surgery okay. That was scary. The peach in my hand slipped slightly. I adjusted it without blinking. Surgery? I asked. Mrs. Carla blinked, confused. Oh, you didn't know? She was in the hospital a few days ago. Out now, though. Thank the Lord. I nodded, managing to mumble something like, yeah, thank God. But the edges of my ears burned. After I left the market, I didn't drive back to the motel. I drove around, just aimless loops, stopped at a gas station, bought a bottle of water I didn't want, sat in the parking lot and stared at the steering wheel. They didn't forget to tell me. They chose not to. That evening, I got invited to Darnell's pre-engagement dinner. It wasn't a formal thing, just close friends and family, according to the message Lorraine forwarded to me, without a single greeting attached. I showed up on time, slipped in through the side door like a background actor who knows not to block the camera. The house was decorated with twinkle lights and photo frames lined up on side tables. Smiling faces. Matching t-shirts from vacations I wasn't invited to. After dinner plates had been cleared, everyone moved into the living room. Lorraine clicked the remote, and a slideshow lit up the flat screen. Let's take a walk down memory lane, she announced with enthusiasm she never once used for anything involving me. Music played. The kind of sentimental background score that makes people tear up over nothing. Childhood photos, baseball games, dance recitals, first days of school, all edited into a clean, glowing montage. I waited, and never showed up. Even when they played old birthday videos, the camera angles were cropped. Tight frames. Faces turned just enough to cut me out, without making it obvious. When the slideshow ended, everyone clapped. Darnell kissed his fiancée on the cheek. Lorraine dabbed her eyes. I got up and walked to the porch. Outside, the air smelled like cut grass and charcoal. I pulled out my phone. No messages. I scrolled through old emails. The last one from Lorraine had been a forwarded electric bill. No greeting, no context. 2 years ago. Back inside, dessert was being passed around. Brownies and vanilla ice cream. I walked toward the table, but stopped halfway. The chair I'd been sitting in earlier was gone. Someone had taken it, probably to the other room. No one noticed. I stood for a moment, then walked into the kitchen, fixed a plate, and sat by the back door. No one said a word. I didn't expect them to. For years, I thought the worst thing they could do was forget me. I was wrong. The worst thing was knowing they remembered and erased me anyway. I left the house that night without saying goodbye. No one followed me. No one asked if I made it back to the motel. It was almost funny, how easy it had become for them to treat me like a loose thread no one wanted to pull. 2 nights later, around 10:30, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. It was local. I hesitated, then picked up. Hello? A familiar voice answered, warm in tone but tight at the edges. Hi, sweetheart, it's Mom. She said it like we'd spoken yesterday. Like we shared recipes or traded weekend plans. I hope I didn't wake you. I know it's late, but your brother's in a bit of a bind with the mortgage. Nothing catastrophic, just complicated. She forced a chuckle. He's just stretched thin. The market's so unpredictable these days. I said nothing. We were wondering, she continued, if maybe your boss might be willing to help out. Just a short-term thing. Bridge loan, strictly professional. You know how folks talk. We can't have people thinking we can't keep up. It was surreal. She was asking me to tap into a relationship she assumed I had, for a favor she framed as saving the family's name. I stayed quiet, long enough for her to speak again. Venitra, you there? Still silent. Well, anyway, think about it, okay? It would mean a lot to Darnell, and to me. She didn't say, I miss you. She didn't ask how I was. She just wanted access. through a boss I supposedly worked under. I hung up without answering. The next afternoon, I stopped for gas on the way back from a property inspection. As I filled my tank, Mr. Franklin shuffled over from the pump across the lot. He still wore the same flannel cap and walked with a limp from his army years. "Didn't expect to see you back in these parts," he said, nodding. "Didn't expect to be back," I replied. He looked at me for a moment, then leaned in slightly. "I know it ain't my place, but I figured you ought to know. Your mama and Darnell are about to lose the house. They borrowed heavy, put everything under his name." I stared at him. He kept talking, softer now. "Bank already turned him down. They're scrambling. Don't want nobody to find out." My hands were still on the pump handle, but my body had gone still. "They're not coming to you because you're family," he said. "They're coming because they're out of options." That night, I sat in a quiet booth at a small cafe near downtown. Laptop open, documents pulled up. The address of the house I grew up in was highlighted in yellow. Pending foreclosure. Purchase negotiations already in progress. I didn't need to ask who was handling the file. I was. My name sat at the top of the acquisition paperwork, co-owner of the firm currently working to finalize the buy. I flagged the file for internal handling, not to stop it, to protect it, from interference, from family, from sentiment. A few minutes later, I picked up my phone and called the number Lorraine had used. She answered on the first ring. "Venetra? Mom, you asked if my boss could help with Darnell's mortgage," I said flatly. She hesitated. "Yes. Did you talk to him?" I didn't give her the chance to keep spinning. "I am the boss." Silence. I don't approve financial rescues for people who forget I exist until they're underwater. I could hear her breathe in sharply. She tried to recover. "That's not fair, baby. You know how family works. Sometimes we fall apart, but we're still blood." "Ask Darnell," I said, my voice calm. "He's got all the titles, doesn't he?" There was a soft gasp, then a sniffle. She was trying not to cry, or trying to make sure I heard her doing it, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften my tone. "I've been invisible long enough," I said. "Let's keep it consistent." Then I hung up. For a moment, I just sat there. The hum of the fridge behind the counter filled the space around me. The waitress brought a refill without asking. I stirred my coffee slowly. The empire they ignored was about to own the house they worshipped. The next morning, I got a text from Lorraine. "Can you swing by the house? Just want to talk. Nothing heavy." She even added a smiley face. I stared at it for a minute, then replied, "Sure, 2:00. Before heading over, I stopped at a cafe and picked up an iced tea, then made one more stop, at the firm's satellite office downtown. I asked Hannah, one of my legal advisors, to come along. I didn't tell her why, just asked if she could meet me at the gas station 2 blocks from the house and wait in the car. Just in case. She didn't ask questions. That's why I trusted her. At 2:05, I pulled up the gravel driveway, parked, and walked up to the porch, like I wasn't walking into a setup. Lorraine met me at the door with a practiced smile and a plate of lemon cookies. "Darnell's here too," she said, as if that were normal. "Just a quick thing to go over." He was already at the kitchen table, papers laid out, pen clipped neatly to the top. Lorraine sat next to him. The plate of cookies stayed untouched. Darnell gestured to the stack. "It's just a signature. Mom's credit is shot, and the bank won't give her the time of day without a cosigner." I looked down at the document. Pages and pages of dense legal text, but one thing stood out in bold, underlined font. Joint responsibility. All financial burden shared equally by signing parties. No clause for removal. He smiled the way people do when they think they've rehearsed their part well. "Come on," he said. "No risk to you. You've got the money. You don't even need to do anything. Just sign so we can keep the house." Lorraine chimed in softly. "You owe this family something, don't you?" I pulled out my bag, unzipped the side pocket, and set a small digital recorder on the table. "Would you mind repeating that?" They both froze. Darnell's mouth opened, but no words came. Lorraine's smile faded. "I'm going to take this home," I said calmly, collecting the papers. "And have my legal team look it over," Darnell scoffed. "Seriously? You're dragging lawyers into this?" "You did," I replied, "when you brought me into something that's already falling apart." I stood up. Lorraine reached out gently. "Venitra, this is your family. We're not trying to trap you, just asking for help." I met her eyes. "You're asking for access. That's not the same thing." On the way back, I stopped by a diner for a late lunch. It was the kind of place where everyone knew someone's aunt or cousin, where gossip passed like condiments across the table. I sat at the counter and ordered coffee. 10 minutes later, someone tapped my shoulder. It was Denise Chapman. We'd gone to school together, different circles, but still familiar. She leaned in like we were best friends. "I heard you're still mad." I turned slowly. "Darnell says you're freezing them out, just letting them sink, that you like watching it happen." I didn't blink. "You'd be amazed how loud guilt sounds when it's dressed up as duty." She opened her mouth, thought better of it, and left. Back in my car, I laid the contract out across the passenger seat and read every word. Hidden beneath the jargon and fine print was a clear trap, one I was expected to walk into with my eyes closed. The agreement didn't protect me. It exposed me. If Darnell missed a payment, which he would, I'd be liable for the full amount. And there was no clause to opt out. It was signed by him, prepared by his friend's firm, already notarized. I folded the papers neatly, tore the corner just slightly, slid them into an envelope, and attached a sticky note. "This is the last time you mistake silence for compliance." That evening, just as I was sorting through emails at the motel, my phone buzzed again. Voicemail from Lorraine. Her voice, no longer warm. "I raised you better than this. I don't know who you've become, but people are talking. People are asking why you're acting so cold. You're embarrassing this family." I hit play again, then forwarded the file to Hannah. After a pause, I recorded my response. "You didn't raise me. You raised an image, a story, something you could point to in public. But that version of me died the day you taught me love was conditional. I'm not here to perform anymore. I'm not here to be silent for your comfort." I hit send, and for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. They thought I'd fold like before, but this time, I brought paper that bites back. The courthouse wasn't grand, just tired. Beige carpet, flickering fluorescent lights, and a podium with a microphone that squeaked every time someone adjusted it. I sat in the back row while names were called. Most people were here to dispute fines, finalize property sales, settle debts they couldn't carry anymore. When they called the Henderson case, I stood. I didn't rush. Inside the small hearing room, Darnell was already seated at the front table, Lorraine beside him, flipping nervously through paperwork. A few locals filled the back, probably city staff and a couple of reporters fishing for small-town drama. When I walked in, I didn't look at either of them. I walked straight to the desk and handed over the final signed transfer documents. My name, my firm, everything in order. The clerk gave a brief nod and announced, "Acquisition confirmed, effective immediately." Whispers followed like smoke. Darnell leaned toward Lorraine, muttering, "Bet it's one of those out-of-state developers, probably gonna tear it all down." Then the back door opened again. This time, it was me who stepped through, dressed in navy, clipboard in hand, no apology in my stride. Silence. The kind that doesn't need shushing. I walked past the folding chairs, past the city seal on the wall, and took my place at the other table. The clerk cleared his throat. "Just to clarify for the record, Miss Venitra Henderson holds 61% ownership in the purchasing entity and has acted as the primary decision-maker in this acquisition." Lorraine's eyes widened. Darnell froze. The banker beside them stammered, "She's had power of attorney on this deal since last quarter," I finished for him, without looking away from the panel. Darnell blinked hard. "You went behind our backs." "No," I said. "I went through the front door. You just weren't watching." I turned toward the counsel. "This isn't a family dispute. This is a business conclusion. Lorraine stood abruptly. How could you do this? This house is your legacy, too. I pulled a folder from my bag and opened it. Inside were printouts, forged applications, digitally altered email threads, loan documents submitted with my name, but not my hand. This, I said, holding up a sheet, is the application Darnell submitted 3 years ago using my identity as collateral. I passed another page across the table. And this is the timeline of wire transfers, accounts opened using my SSN, addresses tied to my name, but listed as authorized user, D. Henderson. A low gasp rippled through the back row. I didn't raise my voice. You used me, repeatedly, but I made sure every misuse had a breadcrumb, and now those breadcrumbs lead here. Darnell started to speak, then stopped. His hand trembled as he slid it off the table. One of the council members asked, Miss Henderson, do you intend to press charges? I looked at Darnell for the first time. Not yet, but I've started the clock. Outside, the sun was merciless. Reporters swarmed the steps like bees to a cracked jar of honey. Is it true you just reclaimed your childhood home? Are you planning to evict your own family? Is this about revenge? I didn't answer any of them. I stepped into the car where Hannah waited in the front seat, files already packed away in the back. She looked over her glasses. Well? I exhaled slowly. It's done. And what happens now? They live with it, I said, with the silence, the kind I lived in for 30 years. Behind us, Lorraine sat on the edge of the sidewalk, head in her hands. Darnell paced angrily, trying to talk on his phone, but no one was picking up. As we pulled away, I didn't feel relief. Not victory either, just weight shifting. I didn't have to destroy them. I just let the truth finish what they started. The following week, I was back in Houston, buried in zoning files and back-to-back meetings, trying to push aside the shadow that Clarksdale had left trailing behind me. I didn't say anything about what had happened in the courthouse, not the full version, at least. The ones who needed to know already did. The rest? They'd hear it eventually, the same way I always had. Fragmented, distorted, softened by distance and time, until it no longer resembled truth, only rumor. On Thursday morning, just after 9, the front desk buzzed up to the office. Monica answered, then knocked on my door a moment later, holding a padded manila envelope with no postage, no return address, just hand-delivered, anonymous. I paused my notes on a zoning revision for a commercial lot in Midtown and took the envelope. It was thin but dense, the kind of weight that meant trouble, or at least something meant to stir it. Inside was a set of photocopied documents, neatly stapled. At the top, bold lettering stamped across the first page. Property transfer, Pearl Henderson Estate. My eyes stopped moving. I knew immediately what it was, even before I flipped past the title page. My grandmother's name, Pearl Henderson, appeared on the signature line, but the signature below it wasn't hers, not even close. Her handwriting had always been a little wild, like her voice, loud and swinging with mood. This was tidy, mechanical, a forgery done by someone who had watched her sign checks but never knew her wrist. I turned to the notarization page. The date, 5 years ago. The notary? A firm out of Clarksdale that didn't even exist anymore. Shut down, disgraced. Dead ends, all of it. And then came the name that kept appearing like a bad habit. Darnell. Once as executor, once as witness, and again as heir. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My stomach wasn't tight with shock. That had passed years ago. What I felt was the cold weight of inevitability. While I'd been rebuilding from scratch, scraping together some version of normal 3 states away, they'd been busy rewriting the story. Without me. Without truth. I called Hannah. Get this submitted to probate, I told her. Quietly, no press, no announcements. I'll file it before end of day, she said. Do you want to be present at the hearing? I'll be there, alone. The court date came quickly. Tuesday morning. The courthouse smelled like dust and old paperwork. I showed up early. No family, no bystanders. Just me, Hannah in a charcoal suit, and a judge who looked like he'd seen too many versions of this same story. Hannah handled everything. She was clinical but compelling, methodical as she laid out evidence like a quiet war. She showed digital timelines, voice recordings, sworn affidavits from people who remembered Pearl's voice in those last years. People who remembered who was really there and who wasn't. People who hadn't forgotten what family meant, even if family had forgotten them. There were no objections. No lawyers standing up to argue. No one came to contest it. 15 minutes later, the judge signed off. The documents were declared invalid. The land, nearly 20 acres of hardwood and memory, was legally and irrevocably mine. Always had been, by birth and by blood. The forged transfer was nullified, erased from record like it had never existed. That night, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, lights off except for one lamp. I pulled out an old leather-bound journal from a drawer I hadn't opened in years. Between two dog-eared pages, there was a letter, yellowed at the edges, folded 3 times, still unmailed. It began, "Dear Mom, I don't know how to say this without sounding ungrateful, but..." I read it slowly, as if reading someone else's handwriting. And maybe I was. The person who wrote that letter was younger, more hopeful. They believed in reconciliation, in clarity, in second chances. It wasn't a bad letter. If anything, it was kind. Too kind. But it didn't belong anymore. Not to me. Not to the life I'd built since. I tore it down the fold lines, piece by piece. Not in anger. Just with finality. There are some truths that outlive their purpose. Some stories you outgrow. The next morning, I drafted a new letter. It didn't start with "Dear," no greeting, no farewell. Just a plain, unvarnished message. You may continue to reside on the property until your affairs are settled. I will not evict you. I will not return. This is not an act of punishment. It is a boundary. For your dignity and for mine. No signature, just initials. No address, just a P.O. box. I slipped it into an envelope and dropped it in the mailbox downstairs. Then walked a block and a half to a quiet cafe. Ordered coffee, sat by the window and watched Houston start its day. That evening, I was back on the highway. The Clarksdale exit came up on my right. Familiar green signs, same mile markers, same pull. But I didn't slow down. I didn't look. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, the skyline ahead glowing like a promise I could finally believe in. In the rearview mirror, I saw nothing I needed to return to. Forgiveness isn't a performance, and silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes it means freedom. Sometimes it's both. It had rained the night before, one of those quiet storms that doesn't announce itself with thunder, just slips in and rearranges the air. The next morning, everything outside my window looked sharper, like the skyline had been freshly outlined. I brewed coffee and stood barefoot on my balcony, watching the sun push through the clouds. There was no sense of conclusion, just space, breathing room. Later that day, I met my team at a duplex in East Austin, newly renovated. Nothing grand, just clean lines, soft yellow paint, a pair of modest porches. The kind of home that doesn't boast, but offers safety. I walked through the rooms slowly, hand brushing over walls, fingertips grazing windowsills. It wasn't mine in the way Clarksdale was mine. It was mine in a better way. Not inherited, not stolen back. Built. Chosen. My assistant, Tasha, stood in the hallway, iPad in hand. "We're good to sign off," she said. "Want me to finalize the paperwork with the foundation?" I nodded. She paused. "Why this one, though? We've passed on bigger properties." I looked around one last time. "Because it's not about square footage. It's about message." She tilted her head. "What message?" "That no one should have to earn the right to be seen." That afternoon, I returned to the office. There was a missed call on my phone. Clarksdale area code. No voicemail, just a call that rang once and hung up. I didn't call back. I didn't need to wonder who it was. Some bridges don't need burning. They just don't lead anywhere anymore. I hit delete and tucked the phone away. That night, I hosted dinner at my house. My house. No last-minute invitations, no passive-aggressive questions about seating charts. Just my team, a few close friends, and my mentor, Mrs. Pearson, who'd once told me, "Sometimes family isn't blood. It's who shows up when your name isn't trending." We had gumbo and cornbread. Someone brought peach cobbler from a bakery downtown. There was music, soft Motown in the background, and conversation that didn't circle around survival or obligation. Midway through the evening, I excused myself to the hallway. On the wall hung a photo, the day we opened our first office. I was in the center, flanked by Hannah and Tasha, everyone grinning, exhausted and proud. That picture used to make me ache. Now it felt like proof. A guest wandered over, a friend of a friend. He pointed to the photo and said, "You've built something incredible. Does your family know?" I smiled. "They'll hear about it eventually, but it's not for them." He looked puzzled, then nodded. Before everyone left, I handed out thank you notes. Not because it was expected, but because I wanted to. No strings, no debts, just appreciation. After the dishes were cleared and the last hugs exchanged, I sat alone with a cup of tea and my journal. I hadn't written in it since I tore up that letter, but tonight felt like it needed marking. I wrote slowly, "You don't win by being invited back. You win by realizing you never needed to audition in the first place. You win by knowing you're enough, even when no one claps." I closed the journal, set it beside the lamp, and walked to the balcony again. The storm had passed. The wind had quieted. My breath felt steady in my chest. They thought I was a silence they could manage. But this empire? It's not made of walls or land. It's made of the woman they never saw coming.